The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Jeong. It's a big day today in South Korea as millions there have headed to the polls to elect a new president to replace Yoon Suk-yeol, who was impeached over his botched martial law bid back in December. The snap election is pivotal with implications for South Korea's democratic future as well as its ties with China, the U.S., and its nuclear-armed neighbor, North Korea. Now, there's about 1 more hour till polls close. Results are expected this evening or early tomorrow, and it's shaping up to be a nail-biter. According to a recent Gallup poll, Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung is holding a slight edge with nearly 50% support. But his main rival, Mr. Kim Moon-soo of the Conservative People Power Party, has managed to close the gap. Will anger over the martial law debacle push Mr. Lee into South Korea's presidential Blue House? Or will the main conservative candidate, Mr. Kim, clinch the seat? What about the other candidates in this closely watched race? And finally, can this election heal South Korea from martial law that fractured the nation? Well, joining us today to share more is Dr. Ryu Yongwook, who is the assistant professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. Hi, Dr. Ryu. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Dr. Ryu, it looks like voter turnout has reached a record high of over 71% as of 4 p.m. local time, which is around 3 p.m. here in Singapore, according to South Korea's Election Commission. Now, there are about 44.4 million eligible voters nationwide, and the total turnout at the last presidential election in 2022 was at 77%. What does the turnout say about how important this election is for South Koreans?
It looks like the final turnout rate will reach close to 80%. And it is the highest since 2000 and about 2%, 3% higher than the last presidential election. I think the high turnout rate reflects the much public interest in the current presidential election. It also reflects the voters who were motivated to cast their votes in one way or another to express their political preferences and to determine which party should govern the nation in the next 5 years.
Right. Well, how did the election season and campaigning unfolded prior for you?
Well, so this one is a snap election, right? Because of the martial law saga, which led to the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. And therefore, we didn't have much time leading up to the current presidency election. So rather than candidates engaging in deep political debates on substantial issues, it's really the martial law saga on which many people took their own stances, plus political rumors and accusations. Those issues dominate the election campaign. And of course, when we move away from substantial debate, it weakens the quality of democracy. So, I think one has to blame the martial law incident for all this, but that characterized the current presidential election.
Right. I mean, early polls have placed Lee Jae-myung of the main opposition Democratic Party as the frontrunner among 6 candidates, followed by Kim Moon-soo from the ruling People Power Party. Are we still seeing Mr. Lee leading the field right now? How have the polls shifted in the last few days, and what does it look like, now as we speak?
Yeah, there are 3 major candidates, in this presidency election. And Lee Jae-myung is clear front runner. I mean, we don't know the latest polls because the election law in South Korea prohibits the publicization of opinion polls from 6 or 7 days prior to the election. But all the polls before the prohibition kicked in suggest that Lee leads the pack with a comfortable 10% lead over the closest rival, the conservative candidate Kim Moon-soo. I think today we will probably see votes and support gravitating towards the 2 main political parties. So the gap will probably narrow, so it won't be probably 10%. But I think all the indications suggest that Lee remains the favorite candidate to win the presidential election.
Okay. Well, South Koreans are electing a new president in the wake of former President Yoon Suk-yeol's dramatic removal from office for attempting to impose martial law last December, as you've earlier mentioned as well. Now, under ordinary circumstances, South Koreans would not be voting for a new president until 2027, since Yoon's 5-year term would have continued after he was elected in 2022. What political ramifications then has the impeachment crisis and the absence of a stable presidency have in this election?
Under usual circumstances, there will be more time for presidential candidates to state their policies, explain their policies to the public, engage in debate as a way to inform the public as to which one should be the national leader.
Right.
But because today's presidential election is a snap election, the public went to the polling booth much less informed about the policies of various candidates, and mainly driven by, once again, their stances on the martial law incident, various political scandals, corruption scandals and rumors. And as said earlier, it led to the martial law saga also led to the division of the Conservative Party. And therefore, for the Conservative Party, the current presidential election was an uphill battle for them, right from the very beginning.
Right. So let's turn our attention to Lee Jae-myung, who is the former human rights lawyer and is leading the polls with nearly 50% support. Now, he narrowly lost back in the 2022 presidential election to Yoon. What are his top priorities, though? What has he vowed to achieve if he is elected president?
His top priorities are economic growth, creating jobs, restoring democracy in Korea, and dealing with certain foreign policy issues such as North Korea, Trump tariffs, and improving ties with neighboring countries, especially China. Now, all these are promises at present. And, as you know, politicians make all sorts of promises during the election campaign. So we have to wait and see who he will appoint in key administrative positions if he gets elected as president, and what concrete policies he will actually adopt and produce once he takes office. But we don't have to wait too long because the new president will need to get to work immediately starting from tomorrow.
Right. Just diving in a little deeper on Lee Jae-myung for a bit here. I mean, he was handed a political lifeline after his trial was postponed until after the election. Now, Mr. Lee, so he still faces multiple criminal charges and an ongoing trial. But if he wins, how might these unresolved cases affect his presidency?
Yeah, this is a thorny matter for Lee Jae-myung. So his criminal cases could limit his political legitimacy to govern the country, and hence he will do whatever he can to make sure that his trials won't interfere with his governance. Now, there is a constitutional issue here as well. So the conservatives argue Lee's criminal trials must proceed even if Lee gets elected as president, and if found guilty, he must step down. The progressives, on the other hand, argue that his cases will be placed on hold if Lee becomes president due to presidential immunity. My understanding is that the constitution of South Korea is unclear on this particular matter, so it's likely that the issue will be sent to the Constitutional Court for determination. And as we know, the Constitutional Court has been quite busy, in recent months. But Lee, if he gets appointed, becomes the president, he gets to appoint 3 judges on the Constitutional Court, which will tip the balance in favor of the progressives. And therefore, it will increase the likelihood that the Constitutional Court will agree with the progressive interpretation of the law, in which case Lee could probably govern the country during the tenure of his presidency.
Right. Do you think if he is convicted and if he does win, the ruling PPP will try to impeach him as well?
Well, the PPP doesn't have numbers, in the legislature. So the most significant criterion to kickstart impeachment process is to pass an impeachment motion in the legislature. But Lee's Progressive Party controls the legislature, so I don't think the Conservative Party can proceed with any kind of impeachment process against Lee if he gets elected as president.
Right. But how has the public perceived Lee so far? Are they choosing him because they believe in his values, or is it more of a concept of, say, choosing the lesser of two evils?
Yeah, whether it's Lee Jae-myung or anyone else, I think usually the choice in politics just comes down to choosing the lesser of two evils. Mm-hmm. Lee gets very divided perception. Right. So, his supporters see him as a practical and very savvy politician who has fought his way through a series of political accusations and persecutions under the impeached former President Yoon. Mm-hmm. While the conservatives see Lee Jae-myung as a criminal and potential dictator who is bent on political purge and using his control of the legislature to concentrate power onto himself. Let's just hope that the progressives right in their judgment of Lee Jae-myung.
Well, taking a look at the Conservative Party, PPP, as well, Mr. Kim, he has tried to position himself as a fair and just person, but he remains deeply tied to Mr. Yoon, who was impeached. Why hasn't he been able to break away from that image, you think?
So during the election campaign, any politician will seek to mobilize all the voters, right, as much as he can. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned earlier, the Conservative Party, from the very beginning in this presidential election, had an uphill battle. Kim Moon-soo just wanted to mobilize all the conservative voters that he could. And of course, we know that there's a sizable conservative group that still supports Yoon. And that's why Kim Moon-soo could not distance himself away from Yoon. Mm-hmm. But once the election is over, I think we are likely to see Kim distancing himself from Yoon, regardless of whether he wins or loses the presidential election.
Right. Well, other than the two major ones here, are there any other parties that have made an impact this election?
Yeah, there's a one-third candidate by the name of Lee Jun-suk from Reform Party, and that person is relatively young, in his early 40s. And he has been polling around 10%. How much he will end up receiving in the end remains to be seen, because I think the votes will gravitate towards the two main parties, because casting vote for this third candidate will have little influence, right, on the final outcome. And of course, Lee Jun-suk will hope to pull above 10%, in which case he will become a major future political contender. At the same time, he has rubbed shoulders with Lee Jae-myung. So if Lee Jae-myung gets elected as president, I'm pretty sure that Lee Jun-suk will probably have a hard political life afterwards, and therefore his political skills will be tested under Lee Jae-myung's presidency.
Okay. Well, while the campaign has focused on everything from the economy to corruption, there's another issue weighing heavily on voters' minds as well, and that's national security. Now, North Korea has been working to strengthen its armed forces and had railed against the previous administration's efforts to draw closer to both Washington and Tokyo. North Korea has always had nuclear threats here. Is this now a growing concern, though? How much has the public weighed this issue as their top concern as they headed to the polls today?
Despite the importance of foreign policy issues, usually foreign policy is not top concern for voters, not just in Korean politics, but in other countries as well. And for this particular election, North Korea featured even less during the campaign, probably because of the effect of Yoon's martial law saga that resulted in the snap election. But whoever becomes the president will need to make progress on the North Korean issue. Under President Yoon, when he adopted a more hardline approach to North Korea with emphasis on deterrence, it only pushed North Korea away and to get closer to Russia. So the North Korea-Russian military development has been a major security concern, not just in Ukraine, but also on the Korean Peninsula. While much uncertainty remains, I think if Lee Jae-myung gets elected as next president, then what we have is the repeat of Trump, Kim Jong-un, and progressive president in South Korea that gave rise to a flurry of diplomatic exchanges during Trump's first presidency. And hence, we might see similar dynamics taking place between U.S. and North Korea and on the Korean Peninsula if Lee Jae-myung becomes president. hopefully, right, with concrete progress being achieved this time.
Mm-hmm.
However, if Kim Mun-soo is elected, he will focus on close consultation with Washington on his North Korea policy. And therefore, I think in the end, what happens on the question of North Korea will be driven mainly by the U.S. policy towards Pyongyang. And Trump has already shown signs of and his willingness to sit down with Kim Jong-un and engage in negotiation. Right now, we know that Trump has been busy with many other things, so he has not made a clear move on North Korea, but I think in due course we will see more activities taking place on the Korean Peninsula between U.S. and North Korea.
Well, speaking of Trump and the U.S. here, the new president will also immediately face foreign policy challenges dealing with the United States as well as China. Is there a potential risk of external pressure from Washington to push Seoul towards a confrontational China policy?
Sure. South Korea, like many other countries, will come under greater pressure to choose between the U.S. and China. And in the recent Shangri-La dialogue, the U.S. Defense Secretary has already given out public messages to the U.S. allies and partners to be close on the U.S. side. Of course, for Korea, the choice is already made in some sense, because being an ally of the United States, there's no way for Seoul not to go with the USA. But the real question is how close Seoul will cooperate with Washington in the U.S.-China rivalry. While the conservatives will have little problem on this matter, the progressive president might generate some friction with the USA. And we know that Lee Jae-myung during the campaign has repeatedly said Seoul should not get involved in China-related matters such as the cross-strait conflict. Also, what Seoul will do will also depend on the posture adopted by Beijing. So if Beijing does not show willingness to improve its ties with South Korea, Seoul will naturally move towards Washington and increase the alliance relationship.
Right. And finally, before we let you go here, Dr. Ryu, looking ahead, given the urgency with which the new president must begin governing on June 4th, which is tomorrow, what do you think are the most immediate challenges he will face domestically?
The new president will need to form his government immediately and set the direction of the country right away, giving clear and stable expectations to the public as to what they can expect during the new presidency. I hope that the new president stays away from the temptation of political purge and prosecution of the other side and focus more on the issues that matter to ordinary people, and that's economic growth, creating jobs, social issues that require fundamental structural reform, and national security.
Right. Well, some great insights from you there. It's just a matter of time till we find out who the next president of South Korea will be in just a couple of hours. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ryu, for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Ryu Yongwook, who is the assistant professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.